It's been a while since my last video. If you haven't seen it yet, I'll link it here. But I left my full-time job back in the beginning of February. And so it's just been a little over a month of being a full-time small business owner. So things have been pretty busy, which is great. And I've been working on a few different areas to try and expand what I've been already doing in terms of my art business. And I thought it'd be helpful to do some sort of recap just to see how February went. And aside from just the numbers of like sales, because that is a little bit more volatile, I thought it'd also be helpful just to talk a little bit about some of the areas that I am working on in terms of growth and expanding into things like wholesale and other events, using what I've learned already in the past couple of months. So after my job, some of the things that I worked on included getting my own domain and business email address. I was previously just using like loodlesdoodles@gmail, which is totally fine, and I don't think it's absolutely necessary, but it is also not super expensive to get a domain and connect that with your Shopify. Previously, I was using a link store URL redirect tool to have it redirect to my Etsy before I had my Shopify. And then I did this knowing that I would eventually roll off of Etsy as my primary shop. I still have my Etsy, but I'm not really directing traffic to it, and I'm redirecting the loodlesdoodles.store URL to my Shopify now. And so I did that in advance knowing that I could just flip it without changing anything on my packaging or like business cards or anything like that, so that I wouldn't have to get new ones made before I use them up. So now I still have that and it still redirects to my Shopify, but now I also have loodlesdoodles.com. It just looks a little bit more professional. I think if I'm going to be looking at potentially doing wholesale or consignment or partnering with other local businesses, it's just a nice to have. I don't think it's necessary at all, but it costs me very little. I think maybe like a few bucks a month just to have that, and also have my own like work Gmail address, and that does also come with some extra storage and things like that with Google Workspace. So I got that set up. I also did 2 in-person markets in February. So the reason I did so many markets in the last few months was not necessarily to try and make a lot of sales through them, though obviously that's a very nice goal to have. But I think with so many variables and me being new to it, that wasn't necessarily the primary goal. The primary goal was to do different events with different organizers, trying to understand what the audiences were at those events, and just to be learning, honestly. And so trying to understand what went well, what maybe didn't go as well, and trying to pinpoint what were some factors that contributed. Because I had 2 in February, and I did one in January, which was a Lunar New Year like party at Third Culture Bakery, and that was a really strong turnout because Lunar New Year is a pretty big holiday, and also Third Culture has a pretty good following, and so there people really show up, which is amazing. So thinking about things like the timing of the events and if they're associated with any holidays, and the types of people that they draw, how many other vendors there are at these events, those are all things that I'm looking at to determine how should I be looking at selecting different events to apply for or do in the future, if I'm looking at them as more of an additional sales channel. For right now, I think it's really just connecting with other vendors and small businesses and learning a little bit more about the audience, getting my name out there a little bit more. And then if I do make at least my booth feedback, which I did for both of those, then that's a plus. So I did 2 of those in February, and I'll talk a little bit more about those. I also updated my packaging for my keychains and pins. This is such a small thing, but it is something that I'm looking at more in terms of just branding. How do I want my products to look? And so I did make some changes. I'm still printing all of the backing cards and everything at home because I do think that Like, I may want to iterate a little bit more before I start having them made in larger batches, printed professionally. But maybe it'll be a long while before I do that. But at least it's easier to kind of make changes faster when I'm doing those in small batches at home. So I'm still trying to figure out if I like what I have now, but the way that I updated it, I also wanted to make sure I was able to reuse things that I already had, so I wasn't trashing or throwing away the old packaging. So I'll share a little bit about that as well. And then I'm also looking at expanding into different product types. In the last month, I also worked on introducing art prints, and so I did find a manufacturer or like a printer for this, just to make sure that if I'm going to be making things that people will be paying for, that they will have something that is of really high quality. And I think my printer is fine, it can print pretty high quality things, but I think I was debating between spending the time to do research and test out different types of paper and cardstock, and then you also have to fiddle a little bit with like the printer settings to make sure that they're printing the colors the right way depending on the type of paper also. And so I decided that I would just offload that, at least for now, and have that sent off to a printer where they already know what they're doing, and then I can just make sure that I have what I want essentially right off the bat. So for all of February, in terms of sales, I made $395. I'm just gonna round all of these. $395, so just under $400. So it is down 50% from January. But in February, I didn't have like a major shop update, whereas I did in January. And also I had the Lunar New Year pop-up, which is again a really large holiday event, or is a large event in the sense that it's a big holiday. And so that also attributed to actually half of the sales for January. So with that in mind, I think this is actually a pretty okay place to be. It is still more than I made in November. December, it was a little bit more because it was a big holiday month. People are shopping for gifts. So trying to kind of account for all of those things, that actually is not a terrible place to be. And then of the $395, about $125 came from my Shopify sales. So that is still more than both November and December, where in those months, most of my income actually did come from in-person events. I didn't have any major shop updates in January, but I did introduce some of the new barbell stickers that I had that were kind of subtle pride themed, and so those ended up being one of the top selling products for February. The Eat the Rich sticker continued to do well. My Tasteful Nude sticker also got a lot of love, and also the ADHD, like, it's okay if your dopamine is store-bought sticker, as well as the capybara like boba sticker. Those were the top selling products of February. And then I still made more in my in-person market sales, so that accounted for $243, which again was down from January, but January was the Lunar New Year event. For this month, the in-person markets I had were on the 8th and also on the 14th, like on Valentine's Day. There was a queer speed dating / market event that I did, and that turned out to be better than the one I did the weekend before in San Jose. I think the reason behind those were that the event in San Jose was a lot broader themed. There wasn't really like a cohesive theme aside from kind of loosely Valentine's Day themed. And it was a lot more vendors. It was like 40 to 50 vendors, I think. The tables that I was at, like that section was kind of in the back of the venue. And so a lot of people didn't even know about that section, and we still got some traffic, but I would say the energy levels of the audience was also pretty different. I think a lot of people were there just to casually browse and not really committing to buying anything, which I think is totally understandable. If you have like 50 vendors available to you, I think I would want to make some rounds before I decide to commit like where I want to spend my money. So I did still make my booth beat back. That was the plus, but generally it was a lot slower than the previous events that I went to. And so I don't know if I will be going back to that one. Everyone was super nice, but I just don't know if that the audience really connected with my work, which is totally fine. Whereas the following week, I feel like even though it was also slightly slower to start, it did pick up later in the night. And I feel like there's a lot more connection to the work that I was doing and the keychains that I had, stickers and all of that. I also did introduce some mystery like sticker packs, and I don't know if that helped. I didn't end up selling more of the mystery bags than just the one-off like stickers where you knew what you were getting, but I did sell a couple of those, so I think maybe that helped because I did sell them in a pack, so people spend a little bit more than just like a single sticker. So I think those are things that I am going to take into account when I apply for other markets in the future, to make sure that there's like a very good fit for the work that I do with the audience. So for Etsy, I made a whole $9. So I think that is pretty clear that I was the one bringing most of the traffic to my Etsy shop. So I will still keep it open. I think what I need to do is to sit down and rework some of my keywords and SEO. I don't have every single item listed on there that I do have on my Shopify, so I will probably look at that as well and redo some of the product photos. But honestly, I feel like that might not be where I can move the needle the most in terms of growing my business, so I'm not going to prioritize that as much, but it is something to keep in mind. I mean, I'm not really paying anything unless something gets sold, so other than like the 20-cent listing fee once every 3 months. So I'm not too worried about it. I would rather spend that time working towards getting into wholesale and consignment opportunities. So it's very clear, I think going to Shopify was the right choice. For now, I'm able to customize the branding a lot more, and I can use the built-in newsletter function as well to share any sort of like promotions or like promote other businesses in the community. So I think all in all, still a good choice to have that started. Marketing wise, I also put in a little bit of effort here to try and expand some of my, I guess, like online presence and just general awareness of my work. And so one thing I did was to list my business on the Everywhere is Queer app, where you can go on and look for queer-owned businesses. With this, I actually got a few new Instagram followers and visits to my shop. I don't think I got any immediate sales right off the bat, from what I could tell, but sometimes it takes multiple touch points before people are actually inclined to spend money, so I'm totally okay with that. And then I also started selling a few of my items on a virtual market called That Queer Market. And so they also carry products from other queer-owned artists. So I will link them below also if you wanted to check that out. And so going into the next portion of the recap, I also did tally up my social media growth. So for Instagram, I went from 222 to 280 followers in February. I think I have more than that as of today, but this is just for February. And then for YouTube, I went from 41 to 58, even though I only shared one long form video, but it was very encouraging to see that as well. I know I wasn't as active as I wanted to be on here. And then on Threads, I also grew from 202 to 250-ish followers. I think I'm also slightly more on that, but I would say Threads is very interesting because I feel like I'm able to have better connections with some of the other like artists and small business owners on there. I don't think it's as much people who would necessarily be consumers. So I feel like even though I have fewer followers on Threads, I think the connections that I build there have really carried over to people that I'm interacting with on Instagram as well. The last thing that I really wanted to make some progress on after leaving my full-time job was to be able to explore wholesale and consignment opportunities. So one way is to get on Faire, which is basically like Etsy but for wholesalers. Shopify has a nice integration where you can pull in all the products that you sell and then you can pick and choose which ones to include and not include. However, there is a pretty hefty like commission fee if people find you on Faire and then order from you that way. So I wanted to focus on building like direct connections with stores and then send them the link to my Faire if that's part of their process. If a store goes to your Faire link directly, then Faire doesn't take a commission fee. And so what I have been doing is I've looked at a few gift shops that I think would be in line with what I am making. You know, they feature artists that do similar types of work. The values of that store are also very aligned. So then I was able to then carve out time to visit them in person. And again, this is also where leaving my full-time job has made it easier to do, because I can visit them in the middle of the day and get to talk to either some of the employees or just honestly just scope out the vibes, for lack of a better term, of the place and physically see, you know, what types of work do they sell? Does it seem in line with the types of work I do? Do I bring something that's a little bit different? And so I'm a really big believer that I think building a connection in person is really helpful, because then you can actually understand, like, what is this store looking for? There's some information that you can get from these places like websites or Instagram pages, but I think building that in-person connection is always better. In fact, one of the stores that I visited in Berkeley a couple weekends ago, I was looking at their art and the stickers that they had from other artists. I recognized a couple of the artists that they were featuring. I talked to the owner, because it is such a small business that the owner is actually the one checking people out at the register. And so we got to talking and sharing a little bit about what I do. I'm actually doing my very first like solo pop-up that's not attached to any sort of event or with a business that I already have a connection with next month. And so I'm really excited and a little bit nervous about it, but I think it goes to just show that being able to make that in-person connection and putting yourself out there, which is not something that normally comes naturally to me, actually does, you know, pay off. So that's one place that I checked out. There's another place that I looked at in Alameda. So that place, I'm looking at doing consignment, which is like you're able to sell your work there. They're able to take a cut of the sales. And so you don't pay anything to sell there. Well, that's not the case for every place, but for this shop, you don't pay anything to sell there from what I can understand. And then wholesale is where the stores will pay for your items up front, but usually they pay like 50% of what your retail prices would be. So you get more money up front, but they take a bigger cut. So that's usually how that works. Those are the areas that I'm looking to expand in. So I'm excited about that, because I think having been able to connect with employees, I really do feel like it could be a very good fit. Another thing that I've been doing more of is to be more involved in community events. So I was able to donate some of my Stronger Together barbell stickers to a local gym in Concord called the Resistance Gym. They're a very inclusive, like anti-diet culture type of powerlifting gym. They also have some strongman or strong person equipment and classes there. And then I also donated some to Rain City Fit in Seattle. They're owned by my old powerlifting coach from 2016 now. Yeah, from a long time ago. They host like a Pride deadlift party every year, and I actually participated in that in 2023. And so I can't make it up there in Seattle this year, but they always have like a fundraiser attached to their competitions to contribute and donate to local organizations. I think the biggest thing for me in terms of my work is to connect with the community and make people feel heard and represented and celebrated. So it's really important to me to be able to have time to do these types of activities, and I'm excited to do more. So yeah, overall I feel like in terms of sales, February was a little bit slower than January, but accounting for the fact that I didn't have a major shop update, the events were very different, I'm pretty happy with how things are going in terms of all the other non-quantitative things that have been happening. I think I'm still growing my audience and building more connections and relationships. I'm definitely going to continue to expand on that. The other thing that I recently started was a Patreon page. I am trying to have a space for sharing more information about like small business challenges and tips and basically what I've learned, as well as some more behind the scenes. Sometimes I just want people to help me make decisions. Also, like if I need feedback on something, I don't know what colors to use as a background for something, for example. I would love to also turn that into a potential paid sticker club in the future. I don't know if that would be interesting to you. Let me know in the comments if that's something that you would want. In the meantime, I'm working on a new shop update for April. It'll probably be mid-April depending on when I get my shipments in. I'm working on some new stickers and prints, and then also a couple of new keychains. And then I have 2 events coming up in the next couple of months. The first one will be the first solo pop-up I'm doing. It'll be with the Imasala Collective. Basically, Imasala Collective is the Mina shop and the Clove and Whole shop and the Masterpiece Coffee in Berkeley. They're all in the same like space, and so it'll be in the garden out there. I'll have a lot of my stickers, keychains, and prints there. So come say hi if you're in the area. That one will be on April 19th on Saturday. And then the next one will be on Saturday, May 10th for the Taiwanese American Culture Festival. This one is in San Francisco in the Union Square area. This will probably be the biggest event that I've done in a while, but this is my first time doing like a Taiwanese focused event, so I'm excited to see how that goes. And also it'll be at a 10 by 10 booth, which is I think the largest space that I have had. So I need to figure out how to do my whole layout and actually use the space effectively, but let me know in the comments if you're going to be at either of those.